Hello, this is Sarah V, and today I would like to tell you a little bit about my pattern making final from college. The pattern for it is Asymmetrical for my scoliosis, and I would like to remake it today, not with plaid, because matching the plaid with an asymmetrical pattern isn't super fun, but I am going to be using this small whale black corduroy with string, of course. Always has string on everything here. Some black corduroy. And for the contrast, I am going to be using this houndstooth. I think this might be an upholstery fabric, but I'm not sure. My mother found it for free at a yard sale. So it is what it is. I think there's about a yard of it. So hopefully that will be enough. Worst comes to worst, I do the inside facing out of the corduroy or another black fabric. This is the rendering I made for my final. And I had to make flats for it. And those would just be like the line drawings on the back of a pattern envelope. It tells you exactly what's there, where there's top stitching, where there's a zipper, where there's seams. This is my bodice front. We fold it in half. So if you look on this one, this is like that much longer on the one side. And then this side's shorter. The top up here is slightly different, but not much. From side to side, we have more of a difference with the side pieces. This is my right side, this is my left side. And they don't look too much different until you flip them. They're together. And the top's not super different, but then down at the waist, it's much different. I think the only thing I really lost points on this was my notches. I added too many along with the front, and I only should have had one. But that's very, very minor. Scooty? No. Has a front and back neckline. Another mistake I made was that I did an all-in-one facing, but I did not have a back zipper. So that turned out quite poorly. Have the pocket piece, if you can see through the cat. Scoot, scoot. Mr. Scooty. And it has a fold-over facing for the top. And this is the piece that goes on top of that, which you just kind of sew together awkwardly the whole way around. There should be a pocket lining piece around here, but it's probably under Scooter again. Yeah. And I have a pocket lining piece that goes on the inside. Because this was lined, I don't think I'm going to line this one though. And then I have my all-in-one facing, which didn't work out. So that kind of stinks. I could either, I'm probably just going to cut this and then add seam allowance to both sides. And then do this on a fold back here. Fold down the seam allowance. And then this is the bodice back. This is the bodice back we have going on. And I didn't do the style lines. They're like mock princess seams. I just put darts in the back. Apparently for the back, I did not do separate pieces for that. This is the left side. Then I have the front, which is just cut on a fold. And then the right side, the one side of my waist might have been a little wider than the other side, because the one side is skinnier than the other side because of the way my back curves over. So I think that's why I had to do that.
Moving on to the other side of the table, I can begin to cut things out. I am starting with the contrast around the neckline and the pocket contrast. I did cut my belt out first because I wanted to make sure I would have enough fabric, and the facings did not end up fitting on the fabric. To make my pattern asymmetrical, basically I just made a mock-up and I was required to come in to make sure that it fit. And my professor, she pulled it down so that it fit and tied elastic around the waist so we knew where the waist would be at, and then she used a marker to trace around it and then pinned out what didn't fit that was like too big, and it got me the unique curves for each side. It actually wasn't too hard, and then I just took it out. Well, I took it apart and then transferred it over to my other pattern that I made and made the corrections. I generally don't make my stuff asymmetrical anymore because I don't like having twice as much pattern paper, and I find that if I just fit my waist to the shorter side, it works out fine.
I was really hoping to be able to cut this out double layered so it would take half the time, but because it wasn't wide enough, I'm going to have to cut out single layer so I can fit all the pieces on, because I want the nap all in one direction. Because it's corduroy, and otherwise some of it will be like, the nap will be up and the nap will be down, and you should really try to keep it in one direction. And I like it so that it pets downward versus upward. I've seen a lot of dresses at stores that are velvet, and a lot of them pet upward for some reason. Like, you think they would pet from top to bottom, but the nap is from bottom to top. So I don't know. But that's just what I prefer. I prefer so that it's smooth from top to bottom.
Moving over to the black corduroy, Scooter is giving me a hard time, and he is trying to attack my roller as I am trying to measure the grain line from the pattern piece to the selvage to make sure that my pattern piece is on grain. After cutting out the side front piece, I was able to cut out my bodice back, center front, and bodice side front from the gap between the panels. Now onto the skirt side back panels. I was able to cut out a facing, the other bodice side front, and the pockets in the gap. I surprisingly had little waist fabric even though I was only cutting in one direction, I was cutting single layer, which usually saves fabric anyways. Sometimes if I know I don't have a fabric, I will actually cut single layer anyway because it does save fabric, and it's usually a very tight squeeze, but I managed to make it work. My last pieces to cut out are the center front and center back skirt panels and the last pocket piece. And once again, Scooty's being a rascal and attempted to amputate his toe, but thankfully I'm always aware of him and kept that from happening. He did that before one time when I was in high school and I was staying up too late, cutting stuff out on the floor of my bedroom, and he squawked at me, but there was no blood and he was okay. All toes accounted for. I just felt really bad, but he also attacked my scissors. See, and now he's trying to snap at my elbow. I am marking my darts in the back by putting pins through the top of the dart and then using the small clips in the fabric to know where to mark them. And I just clip at the very bottom of the dart so that whenever I go to use the chalk, I know exactly where it starts. After pinning my darts, I am marking my patch pockets in the same way, putting the pins through the pattern, removing the pattern carefully, and securing the pins. When I made my wool version for my pattern making final, I marked everything in tailor's tacks. Over at my sewing machine, I am starting with the front princess seams. They function as princess seams but are more of a style line, and then sew the two back darts. At the iron, I'm ironing any seams open and catching the wrinkles that I didn't get the whole way out before cutting it out. I generally will only iron my fabric before cutting it out if it won't lay flat and I will have to fight it. But the metal supports in my board were leaving press marks on the corduroy, so I only ironed it enough so that it laid flat cutting. I should maybe put an extra layer of batting under the cover of the board though. I am now pinning the contrast to the bodice, matching the points where they will meet and matching the notches. At my machine again, I am stitching the contrast on, pivoting once I get to the point and then continuing to sew, and then when I get to the next point, I will pivot again. After sewing both the front and back, I trimmed and clipped the seam, and then edge stitched it on the houndstooth fabric with the seam allowance pointed up towards it. After I did this part, I made a big oopsie. I made the same mistake I had made the first time with the facings. The facings need to be put on without the shoulder seam sewn. Then the one shoulder, right side out, needs inserted between the facing and shoulder of the one that is inside out, and they are sandwiched together. I learned how to do this at my internship in college, and it was referred to as the fast and dirty way. It also makes it easier to adjust the shoulders later on. After my mistake, I unpicked the shoulders, sewed up the armhole and neckline seams, trimmed, clipped, turned it out, pressed it, and sewed the shoulder seams the fast and dirty way. Now that it is fixed, I am sewing the underarm seams and then edge stitching the neckline and the armholes. After quickly pinning and sewing in my label, I can sew the side panels of the skirt to the respective center front and center back panel. After ironing the skirt seams, I am moving on to the pocket. I did end up repinning this and clipping the houndstooth fabric along the curve to get the corduroy in nicer. Now I can sew it together, then I can trim and clip the seams, press the seam allowance towards the houndstooth fabric, edge stitch catching the seam allowance underneath. I originally didn't want to do the pocket lining, but I did quickly sewing along the edge, but not stitching on the corduroy, so I could turn it out later. I can now fold the edge down and match the pocket lining to the pocket and then sew them. After trimming and clipping the seams, I turned them out, ironed them, and quickly sewed the gap shut off camera. Moving back to the machine, I can sew the pockets on. Now I can sew up the skirt side seam, leaving a gap for the zipper on the left side. After many hours of sewing, I can finally pin the bodice to the skirt, matching the seam lines and notches and then sewing them. Off camera, I serged the waist seam and then edge stitched it, with the seam allowance pointed up towards the bodice. Now for the zipper insertion, I stitched the back bodice close to the edge, then lapped the front over it and stitched it down. After tacking the facings down and hemming it, I gave the hem a wee press and completed it.
Overall, I'm really happy with how this dress turned out. I think it's really stinking cute, and I'm excited to get to wear it. I actually did wear it today, and then I came home and ironed it so it wouldn't be all wrinkly because it's cotton, and when you sit down, all the wrinkles appear. But anyway, one of the things I didn't like about this was that up here, it's hard to see because it's black, but in real life, there's kind of like a gathered look from me trying to ease it in, because it didn't exactly, the two fabrics didn't blend as well as that wool did with that very soft, fluffy kind of cotton. Both of them, you could kind of steam them into shape so that you could kind of do what you wanted with them. But this very stiff fabric with this more slightly stretchy fabric, it didn't melt as well together. But that's very minor. But the back turned out better. It's just like this front part here. I also had a little bit of that problem on the pockets, but it is what it is, and I think it turned out quite cute. I did not end up putting the lining in because I was very tired, but I think I will make a black slip that I can wear under it, and I can also wear it under other things. Another reason why I decided to go against putting the lining in is that it would take twice as much room in the washing machine. I am also excited to add this to my total for February. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you'd like to see more sewing content, please subscribe. If you would like to see what I'm up to today, feel free to follow me at Sarah V Sews Vintage. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.